You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 588, Repentance.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we pick apart an episode of Star Trek, running it through the system to see if we can find the morals, meanings, and messages, then asking if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Repentance, the one where Voyager plays host to a bunch of murderers and their captors, and then asks, wait a minute, who's really the bad guy here? I'll be back with trivia in a moment, right after Norman tells all of you how to reach us.
We would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion, paroled so that he can bring you with this week's trivia.
I'm so lucky. All right, trivia for Repentance. We have a story credited to Mike Sussman and Robert Doherty, and we just saw Mike's name on the story for Shattered, where he was teamed up with Michael Taylor. This time, Robert Doherty is back for another credit after getting the sole credit on Inside Man, and he also happens to get the teleplay credit on this episode. This is directed by Mike Vehar, and you may recall that we just talked about Mike as he had helmed the first part of Flesh and Blood, and he will be back 3 more times before jumping over to Enterprise. Let's meet our guest stars. There are several convicts along with their captors who were beamed aboard Voyager, and we will focus on the main 3. Yedek, the Nigerian warden, is played by Tim DeZarn, and it's too bad that we're at the end of Tim's Star Trek credits because he has played a variety of characters over the years, starting with one of the terrorists, Sattler, in the TNG episode Starship Mine. We caught him again in DS9 as Bajoran resistance figure Halb Dyer in Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. Then we saw him in Voyager as a Kazon in Initiations. We featured other career highlights in those episodes of the podcast, and most recently, you can catch him in the short films Wreck, and You're Doing Great, and as a guest on the Billy Bob Thornton starring series Landman. Another returning Trek veteran is F.J. Rio, here playing the imprisoned Joleg. F.J. appeared 3 times quite prominently in DS9 as Enrique Muniz, who met a tragic end, so it's good to see the actor return here in a different guise, and we will see him 1 more time on Enterprise as well. Finally, Jeff Kober plays Iko, and here he's making his Star Trek debut, but you may remember Jeff as a regular Dodger on China Beach.
But he and Robert Picardo were both on China Beach together.
Well, of course. Of course. That is how a lot of TV audiences got to know Robert Picardo. He actually got his start, though, on an episode of V when it moved to series in 1985. Fast forward a bit, Jeff appeared in the Alien Nation movie and in multiple genre TV shows, from The X-Files to Buffy to Earth 2 to the 1985 Twilight Zone. And, David Livingston, I'm so sorry to bring it up, he was even in an episode of Viper. Now, Jeff will be back for 1 more track when we catch up with him on Enterprise.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant, home of a bunch of people who may not be numbers, but they're not free men either.
Prologue. Captain Janeway answers a distress call from a ship flooded with plasma radiation. Harry scans 11 life signs, 2 of which are barely hanging on. Janeway orders the injured beamed to sickbay and the rest to Cargo Bay 1. 9 survivors appear, 3 of whom are wearing dark overalls. Their leader, Yedek, immediately demands his weapons back, claiming the others are dangerous convicts. He glances around and realizes 2 are missing. In sickbay, things escalate quickly when one of the two injured prisoners holds Seven hostage, pressing a laser scalpel to her throat. Act 1. The doctor firmly orders security to stand down while he tries to de-escalate the situation. Tuvok, with Yedick right behind him, arrives promising no one will get hurt. However, Yedick makes no such promise. Seven easily disarms Aiko, who lashes out and takes the doctor hostage instead. Tuvok then fires through the doctor's holographic form, rendering the prisoner unconscious. Later in the conference room, Tuvok questions why Yedick didn't just use the escape pods. Yedick admits that he chose not to escape so that the prisoners couldn't either, as he is taking them back for execution on charges of murder, even though it means a 13 light-year detour for Voyager. Janeway begrudgingly agrees to ferry Yedick and the convicts to their destination, though Chakotay clearly expresses his concerns. Back in sickbay, Seven is fine, but the doctor is glitching from the damage he suffered to Tuvok the Kid's cowboy diplomacy. Janeway checks in on the prisoner and is immediately threatened as he presses his hand against the force field, enduring the pain while demanding his release, or he'll start killing everyone. Having heard enough, Janeway orders all prisoners secured in Cargo Bay 1. Later, Neelix arrives with Talaxian Stew, determined to treat all of the prisoners with dignity in accordance to Federation protocols. Yedick protests that they don't deserve such comforts, but ultimately yields to regulations. Joleg, one of the prisoners, quietly thanks Neelix. Back in sickbay, Seven and the Doctor debate capital punishment, reaching an ethical and moral impasse, with neither willing to budge. Meanwhile, in the brig, Aiko, the one who threatened Seven earlier, refuses his food and then threatens Yedick's children. The warden sends in his guards to teach Aiko a lesson with a brutal beating, which only ends when Starfleet security intervenes. Act 2. Janeway calls Yedick out for Aiko's brutal beating at the hands of his guards. He insists it was necessary, but Janeway removes him from duty and puts the very qualified Tuvok in charge of the prisoners instead. In sickbay, the doctor works on Aiko's head trauma. He uses Seven's nanoprobes to stabilize him. She doesn't see the efficiency in healing someone who will soon be put to death. The doctor makes his stance clear. No one is getting executed on Voyager. What comes afterwards is out of his jurisdiction. Meanwhile, Neelix is back in the cargo bay, serving food. Joleg opens up to him, explaining that as a Benkaran, he's more likely to be convicted because of racial bias regardless of evidence or guilt. Later, as the doctor wakes Aiko, he tells him that Seven's nanoprobes saved his life. As Seven and Aiko lock gazes, he is caught off guard by how Seven didn't look at him with fear. In the mess hall, amid Tom and B'Elanna's attempt to get something to eat, Neelix shares data showing how the justice system is stacked against the Benkarans. Tom and Lana aren't buying it, but Neelix believes Joleg may be telling the truth. Tom warns him, though, every convict has a story. Back in sickbay, Aiko begins writhing in extreme pain, unlike anything he's ever experienced, because the pain isn't physical, it's emotional. His conscience is being bombarded by a torrent of crushing guilt. The doctor and Seven aren't sure what's causing it. Aiko breaks down and begs for the nanoprobes to be removed. He would rather die than live with this kind of remorse. Act 3. The doctor starts to wonder if the Borg nanoprobes actually triggered Aiko's guilt. Seven doubts it, but the scans show new neural pathways forming. The doctor swears he only meant to reduce Aiko's cranial swelling and not to rewire his brain. Since they don't have a baseline for Nagian neurology, Seven suggests reaching out to their medical experts. Later, in sickbay, Aiko asks Seven to stay. He opens up about his childhood, how he used to name constellations. Seven finds his story oddly relatable, and for the two of them, it becomes a rare moment of connection. Back in the cargo bay, Joleg explains to Neelix, Vecto Valek Kavadam. It's ancient Nagian. It means favor the victims. The wealthy can literally buy their way out, unless you're already destitute, like Joleg. But he won't confess or roll over either. The only thing left he can do is ask Neelix to contact his brother. Later, Seven gives Aiko some star data. He says looking at sheer numbers and data feels cold. She promises to make him a proper star chart. He's curious about her implant, but then withdraws from Seven. He reflects on the violence and pain he's caused and says maybe he should die, just as the doctor walks in with new scans. Turns out, Aiko was born with a damaged node in his brain, one linked to conscience. The nanoprobes accidentally repaired it. That might be why he's suddenly capable of remorse. Janeway sees this as a possible explanation, and the doctor believes Aiko can now control his impulses, and Seven says he might not be the same person who committed the crime. Act 4. In the briefing room, the doctor argues that Aiko's behavior was caused by a neurological flaw, and Seven confirms his findings. Yedick insists it doesn't matter. Murder is still murder. Janeway acknowledges that she doesn't have the luxury of giving Aiko the benefit of the doubt and agrees to appeal to the victim's family. It's the only legal path forward. In sickbay, Aiko tells Seven to cancel the appeal. He's convinced he deserves death. She tells him about her past as a Borg and insists that he has changed, but he refuses to accept special treatment and returns to his cell. In the cargo bay, Aiko uncharacteristically gives food to another prisoner, as Neelix observes that something within him has definitely changed. Some things are not the same. Later, Janeway informs Seven that the appeal was rejected. No explanation, no consideration. Seven pushes for asylum, but Janeway refuses, suggesting that Seven's personal guilt is driving this particular crusade. Seven insists Aiko deserves a second chance. Janeway asks whether this is truly about Aiko's rehabilitation or Seven's need for atonement. Then everything goes sideways. An alien ship attacks, power cuts out, force fields drop, the prisoners riot. But Aiko, he stays put, cowering in the corner of his cell. Act 5. Voyager comes under fire as the unknown attacking ship tries to beam out the prisoners. Voyager disables their transporter array, forcing the ship to retreat. Tuvok reports that 2 prisoners are in custody, but another is headed for the shuttle bay. It's Joleg. He takes Yedick hostage, but the transporters are still down. In the cargo bay, chaos erupts. Prisoners barricade themselves, and Aiko steps out of his cell and demands that Joleg hand over his phaser. Then he gives it calmly to Yedick, who stuns the others, but spares Aiko. Later, Yedick convinces the victims' families to at least hear Aiko out. Aiko gives a heartfelt statement. He regrets everything, accepts whatever they decide, and simply asks for understanding. Meanwhile, Neelix confronts Joleg about the attack. It turns out that Joleg's brother was behind it. Joleg tries to manipulate Neelix one last time, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. In Astrometrics, Seven and Aiko talk under the stars. He says he might want to stay. For a moment, there's hope. Then Janeway walks in, and the appeal has been denied, and that is final. Aiko thanks Seven for believing in him, then quietly accepts his fate. Later, Janeway tells Seven she did good work, but notices she's deeply troubled and struggling to make sense of it all. Aiko is going to die for killing one person, while she was responsible for killing thousands. Janeway reminds Seven that losing 20 years of her life to the Borg was punishment enough. The end.
All right, well, let's get right into it with repentance. And I would say that we're going to get right into it just the way the show got right into it, with a dramatic opening, immediately heightening the drama. And I guess we haven't seen it too much, but that thing where the transporter can filter out weapons.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they mentioned that about biohazards and bacteria, viruses and stuff, and sometimes they'll get it right, sometimes not. But I guess to cut out weapons, a good plan.
I mean, there's also security protocol when you beam aliens that you've never met before onto your ship. You know, those level 10 force fields and biofields and all of that stuff. You might want to put those up too, because you never know when someone's going to get held hostage. Jeff Kober, you mentioned him, as one of our guest stars, and he's pretty much recognizable whatever makeup you put on him.
The eyes and the voice. And he is terrific. That'll probably be a familiar thing that we say throughout this episode. That again, dramatic scene with Aiko holding Seven at knife point. And I just kept thinking, like, Seven was just waiting to take him out.
Oh, yeah.
Just waiting for the right moment. And I'm glad we got a little bit of that. And of course, fun bit with the doctor with nothing to worry about. Like, yeah, you can do this all day and I'm a hologram, no problem.
We're seeing like the last couple of episodes or recent episodes we've seen where the doctor's a hologram, then he's not a hologram, then he's solid again, so that weapons and phasers can pretty much go through him at will. Or at the speed of plot. So it's just one of those, Norm, just let it go.
Yeah, but I wonder, is it the doctor deciding how that happens or the computer seeing what's going on, deciding to let that happen? Yeah.
Let me put it to you this way.
Does that happen?
If the doctor decided to become a human shield and protect a patient from harm, then would the computer decide for him to let the energy phase through him or keep him solid to absorb the phaser?
Oh, interesting.
Do no harm, right?
Right, yeah. Right. I'm always a fan of show, don't tell. And there's this moment where Chakotay, Janeway, and Tuvok give each other a look when Yedek says that he's taking his prisoners back to be executed. It's so good. And that's one of those moments I just kept rewinding. You're like, oh yeah, they're saying everything just by the look.
I also liked the lighting detail sewn into the chest area of the prisoner uniforms.
Yeah.
Also, please somebody do that for cosplay, because I thought that was really, really cool looking.
Yeah, those were good. Little reference, Doctor calls Tuvok the kid. Yeah. Well, he says that about Tuvok to Seven. Right. And I guess the Doctor's been watching some old Westerns. That was cool. And I guess Aiko, he shows that he's a badass by holding his hand up to the force field. I mean, does that mean that he can get through it eventually?
That's what I was thinking. I was like, is he showing off that he can just eat that much pain?
Yeah,
I don't
know.
Exactly
sure. Yeah.
By the way, the Tuvok the kid thing now, I can only see him as Bart, like Tuvok as Bart from Blazing Saddles, wearing the Gucci outfit.
I would love that. Yeah.
I have a question for you. I have a question for our audience as well. How long does it take to build a mega brig in a cargo bay?
Right. Where do you keep everybody while you're waiting for that construction team to go in? That's a whole other episode.
Did this dump all the alcoves, the Borg alcoves that used to be there?
Well,
I don't know.
And if you can beam people around the ship, because they do, they're just like, hey, transport Aiko into the brig. Now, why not just hold everybody in a transporter buffer?
Wow.
Right?
How very relics of you.
Make this episode really short. Guess we're just eating rice and stew with our fingers now. That was an interesting bit where Yedek takes away the spoons that Neelix brought, and it's not finger food.
No,
stew.
No,
usually is not. Yeah, this conversation that we get between the Doctor and Seven, that is the heart of the show. We're going to come back to that in a big way for sure. Back to the force field. Sorry to be preoccupied by the force field. Did Aiko throw that bowl through the force field?
Through the feeding hole?
Well, remember, he got it through the hole, and then he ate, and then he's got an empty bowl, and then he just throws it, and you hear it clunk clunk somewhere else in the room in whichever cargo bay they're in. And I'm like, well, would he just throw a bowl through the force field? Why did he just walk right out? Anyway,
I don't know.
But then when they take him to, when Yedek and the guards come in, that is a brutal scene for Star Trek of this era.
That was a beating. But also, we saw a Vulcan security officer respond to the beating. So I've never seen that particular extra before.
Oh, okay. So we've got Tuvok, we got Vorik, and we got one more. And actually, there was one other that we saw.
Vulcan woman. Who was in Chakotay's party. Yeah.
So we got at least 4 on board.
Yep.
Very interesting. And by the way, you could have just done a neck pinch.
Could have?
That would have, if it was Vulcan, maybe. Yeah. I mentioned the Janeway energy that I love that Kate brings to these episodes. The Janeway energy that I love in this one, believe me, he's qualified regarding Tuvok as she's telling Yedek. Love that moment.
I also like in the doctor's scene when he's like saving Aiko's life with the nanoprobes. It reminded me a lot of McCoy saving Mirror Spock's life. It's just no one's dying in my sick bay. That's literally the point of why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Perfect. 7 coming right back with the, it seems inefficient to save the life of someone who's about to be executed. Oh, yeah. Coldly logical.
Yeah.
I love Neelix here getting a dramatic scene with Joleg. More on that later, of course, in Joleg's story, but good use of Neelix.
I mean, Neelix he was curious, and which is great. That's exactly what Neelix should be. I'm hoping that Janeway and Chakotay were just as curious, because we didn't really see enough of that in this episode.
They're not around.
Not really.
You're right. Yeah, good point. And Neelix is interested enough in the Nigerian criminal system to be late with dinner, which is a fun moment and actually gives us one of my favorite lines that Tom Paris has ever said. So Neelix says, "Did you know the Nigerians govern a sector of space occupied by several different humanoid species?" And Tom just says, "If we say yes, will you feed us?"
It is funny.
Great line.
Yeah.
So good. Love this quiet conversation between Aiko and Seven about the constellations. Jeff Kober playing vulnerability really well. Although, just, point here to be pedantic, they are in space.
True.
And he asked Seven, have you seen these constellations? Well, they're kind of hard to see when you're not in the same place all the time.
No, that's true.
So, yeah.
You mentioned that you love it when you have these show don't tell moments. And you're right, there are very many of them in this episode. And I think that actually is due to the actors really knowing their characters. Aiko is saying, talking about the constellations, and he's showing this vulnerable side to him because of the nanoprobes. And then Seven just kind of looks at him, and there's like 3 or 4 emotions in play without even saying a word in her reaction shot to what Aiko is saying. It's unbelievable. I mean, she's so good.
Really. And by the way, I like when she comes back and she's trying to share this constellation data by bringing him a pad with, in his words and numbers. It's like there's something so just sweetly inept about that, because it's Seven trying to continue the connection, but just not getting like, no, it's about the art. It's not about the words and numbers, Interesting reveal that the families of the victims sentence the criminals. Wow. And of course, if you have money, you can buy your way to a lighter sentence. Also an idea we'll be coming back to in our discussion, I'm sure. The idea that the very thought of violence makes Aiko ill. I had many thoughts about that as well. Okay. Again, a topic that we'll come back to, but I thought what an interesting way to visually express his change of heart, what's going on, because he can't just do that like, oh, I changed my mind. No. To have him physically ill was the right choice dramatically, but also works to help us understand.
That leads into a line that he says to Seven, I hurt people, I deserve to die, right? And you can tell that this is the arc that she's going on now, right? And I felt that it was a little bit more nuanced in this way, where kind of Neelix and Joleg's wasn't as, and it was more obvious, I should say. It wasn't as nuanced.
Yeah. Agreed. Now, here's Janeway coming with a line that I didn't quite expect. Our personal opinions are irrelevant. All that matters is Nigerian law. And I thought, wow, okay, that's a little more coldly Borg-like coming from you.
That's not very kind of consistent with where we've been.
With Janeway.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, exactly. I've got thoughts about maybe what else could have been done.
Okay.
And then, going back to Aiko here, just when he says, take back the appeal, and Seven sizes it up, you'd rather die because you think it will relieve your pain. really provocative idea here that I feel like in this segment, there's not a lot of light, funny, haha, oh, look at that moment. There's just all these terrific scenes of dialogue that really get to the heart of the bigger picture story that this episode is telling.
I agree.
It's kind of like a Phantom of the Opera thing here. This guy, Aiko's next line that he has, I'm disgusting.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah. And 7, then that prompts her to have a confession of her own, which is quite tragic. Think back to those times that we've talked about how difficult it is to install in her case, the optical implant, but a cortical node, a cortical implant. Sure. And she knows it's painful because she's been through it. And then I love taking all of this dramatic exposition and giving 7 and Janeway a scene because, like you mentioned, we don't have a lot of Janeway and also not a lot of Chakotay, but I think we need more of Janeway in this. But she's used well because she's the one who sees right through 7 and the emotional impact that this is having on 7. Right. Also, just a little suggestion to Janeway, to Tuvok, to B'Elanna, anybody whose job is relevant to this, have backup power for the force field emitters, especially you got murderers on board.
Well, that's the thing about the climax of Act 4. The prison break's going to happen because you can feel that, Aiko's going to have to make a choice. And that for whatever reason, the power on that level and other levels near it is going to be knocked out so the prisoners can escape. These are the things I still have a kind of like a little bit of a nit to pick because there were episodes we talking about, hey, look, Voyager did this and adjusted this. Oh, wait, that got taken out too. Wait a second, they adjusted to this. And oh, wait, they got taken out too. And then everyone escapes. I'm like, not really, no.
Well, you can always see that stuff coming when it's like, oh, well, we need to accomplish this thing. Oh, but transporters just got taken out. But we need to do this. Yeah, but comms
that's the one.
Taken out
that's
too.
That scene.
Yeah.
Yep.
Always. Yeah. Always. Good thing all the phasers are set on stun though, because as soon as everybody it was like all hell is breaking loose and everybody's got a phaser and they're taking each other's weapons. Okay. At least they're on stun.
Well, I did appreciate that there were different lighting effects for stun and kill, which was great.
Yeah. That's very helpful. Yeah.
I mean, as much as Jeff Kober is a great actor, I wish I was just a little bit more surprised by Aiko's change of heart. Because you can feel that coming. Like, again, you can feel Joleg's betrayal coming. But they do fit the narrative well. And you could tell that when Aiko gives Yedek the phaser, he's like, yeah, I'm turning over a new leaf. This is not an act. But again, it's how it's acted that I give it credit for, not necessarily, that it wasn't transparent, because it was.
Sure. Although I have to say, the first time I watched it, the moment that Joleg gives Aiko the phaser, I didn't know necessarily what Aiko was going to do. Mm-hmm. Was he going to shoot Joleg, stun him? Was he going to hand it to Yedek, as he did? Yeah. There were a few choices that he could make there. And, any of those would be acceptable. But we know that the change of heart has come. Yeah. We know that he's got to do something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Only now the family will hear out Aiko's appeal, which of course leaves us with the question if his empathy will stick. And again, we'll get into that.
In Astrometrics, I think it's like one of the last scenes between Seven and Aiko. He's like standing near this giant circular map that has like a star field display. It's like a system. It's not like a digital, display. It looks more like a painting, but it is a star system. I'm just wondering which star system.
Is it the Nigian homeworld? Is it their area?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. You know who would know? Someone who wrote stellar cartography would know.
Probably so. Yeah. Now, of course, Joleg, and I love the contrast between Joleg and Aiko. Joleg, not the good guy that we thought, but I think we also needed the kind of outcome that we get for him too, because we need to understand the differences in what's going on here. But again, the question is, couldn't he just get the same nanoprobe procedure? I mean, all of them for that matter?
Technically, yes.
Yeah,
I know that this is probably going way too far back, in referencing an issue here. But you remember that episode when Neelix was conned into taking the sister, the nun's technology that started affecting Enterprise and infecting Voyager?
Yeah.
And he and Tom were like, what happened to us? We were some stone cold, street smart con men ourselves. We should never get, and then at the end of the episode, it's like, yeah, we got our mojo back. We know what's going on. We can see like the con coming from a mile away.
I remember that one. Yeah.
I was wondering if you saw this, but was Seven's interest in Aiko more than just friendship? It seemed that there was something more than that, or I think that she wanted something more than that.
Yeah, I think there's a real intimacy there. There is an understanding of people who have been through some very dark things.
Yes.
And whether that would be romantic attraction or if it's just a deep kind of, I hesitate to even call it a friendship, although she does friendly things for him, like bringing him the words and numbers that represent constellations. But there is something kind of mentally intimate with their relationship, and it's great to see.
Yeah. There's wonderful two moments towards the end of the episode when I'm going to refer Janeway as Kate this time because I want to refer to her acting. There were two times where she kind of paused and took a look at Seven, during the wrap up, and Mike, amazing, just absolutely amazing nuance in the acting. There's such compassion and understanding, forgiveness, and also just, I've never walked in your shoes. How can I even understand what's going on with you right now?
Yeah, well, this episode ends with a real note of poignance and also I think just dramatically the way the script is structured. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's up with Aiko, how to navigate this legal criminal justice system or injustice, as it were, but we really bring it back to say, no, this is about Seven's journey now. And I think they put absolutely the right button on it.
I don't think our passengers are here for overdue library books or unpaid parking tickets. Or are they?
So end of Act 5, we were just talking about it, so we might as well stick with that topic. But so much of this is about Seven without making it a 7 of 9 episode. And I think it's really clever, and it's really a tribute to what a good job Robert Doherty and Mike Sussman did in breaking this and just crafting the dialogue here, because we don't spend a lot of camera time with Seven, but what we do get is super valuable to how this unfolds. And I want to stick with this thought that you were having about Seven's link with Aiko, because, all right, let's go back to Seven up until now. We know the story of the Raven. We know how traumatic that was. We know then how difficult, like in The Gift, we know how difficult it was for Seven to be stripped from the only thing that she knew. And we have seen her develop a layer of compassion through her, I guess, for lack of a better word, her assimilation into the Voyager crew and Starfleet's values and human values. And she has been shown a lot of compassion and room for growth by Janeway and of course, the rest of the crew. And it's not easy, but we have seen her become far more compassionate as a person and feel remorse for her time with the Borg. So what's interesting is we actually start this episode with the most cold, logical Seven that you can get. And she is defending the Nigerian death penalty as being sensible, logical. Yeah, that's just what they do.
I'm not sure if she is defending it as more she is being, again, dispassionately objective to it.
It is so dispassionate that you can easily accept the idea that she would not raise a voice or raise a hand or in any way counter the argument that these people should be put to death. Now, It is interesting that she has this argument with the doctor. Mm-hmm. And they are allowed, through the way this show is written, to have these back and forth conversations. She would probably have a similar conversation with Janeway if Janeway was the one who brought it up. But I have to wonder, had we started this out with a conversation between between Seven and Yedick making the case for, well, yeah, we have to get home and execute these people. Mm-hmm. Would Seven just immediately agree to that? Or would that part of her human compassion kick in, or at least her argumentative side, and say, no, but wait, but what about this?
Well, I think that even with the Doctor, if you're using that as the model or Yedick as the model in terms of her response, I do think that she is kind of obviously the analog for us saying, what do we believe at this time? Mm-hmm. You know, are your beliefs being challenged, and are you willing to just say, yep, it's not our concern because they're not our laws? When people become more concerned about when laws affect them is when it affects them directly.
Oh, yeah.
That's why when Seven really understands what's happening with the use of her nanoprobes, and it unlocks, and she sees that unlock the potential of what Iko could have been as opposed to a criminal based on his biological circumstance, then she's like, you know, that seems really familiar.
Well, okay, so that's just it. And here goes the age-old problem of, how do you teach somebody empathy? Can't empathy just be the starting point? And then we go from there, as opposed to a lack of empathy until it affects you personally, until you have some personal connection. And yeah, Seven's perspective, it shifts. She sees this reflection of her own story in Aiko's experience. She had a lack of empathy. She committed these atrocities. Mm-hmm. She was under external control. Iko wasn't under external control, but he lacked the mechanism to understand the consequence of his actions. But Seven's been rehabilitated. She got her dignity back. She has been allowed to grow. So that's the moment that she sees Iko as a person, not as a monster, but somebody like her, and he is worthy of that compassion and maybe even redemption through his repentance, you know?
Well, I mean, think there's a difference between the two, I would say the two sides of this story in this episode. You have the rehabilitation / redemption component, and then you also have the atonement component. And I think that where Seven is kind of at a critical point in her understanding of how humanity works, what is rehabilitation versus atonement? Right? Because rehabilitation is a way to reprogram someone's behavior in order to achieve a specific result. Atonement is looking for ways to be forgiven for things that you have done. You know, so yeah. Is that what she wants? That's why Janeway asks her, is this about atonement? You know, when she's really kind of like seeing Seven kind of show her a different layer of understanding, of her human understanding. Because in the beginning, it's like, nope, this is the law. Rehabilitation doesn't exist. You know, the punishment must fit the crime.
Yeah.
Okay. That's one way of looking at it. But then someone's like, well, you know, I've killed hundreds of thousands of people. I feel differently about that. Should I be put to death? Because that's the punishment for the crime, isn't it?
Well, okay, let's sort of define our terms here. If we say that rehabilitation, just purely for the purpose of our show here, there are many ways that you can, crack this particular egg. But if we say that rehabilitation is the state of not repeating the infraction to begin with, right? So you committed the crime, you did the thing, you're rehabilitated to the point that you will not do that again. And we just agree that that is a starting baseline, right?
Right.
But then the atonement is the part that says, but I understand what I did. And going on what you're saying here, I understand what I did, and I will do what I can to either, if I can't fully right the wrong, in the case of a murder, you can't, I will do what I can to make sure there's less opportunity for that in the future. committed by others, or try to make amends, some sort of restitution for the people who are affected. Now, Seven arguably has done those things because, again, she's given the room to do so. You know, there have been instances in this show where she has shown that she will take the extra step to let somebody else live and grow and be on their own and be better for the experience, because she knows that, well, no, when I was a Borg, I took away those opportunities from people. So now I can help people not go through that.
But I think the difference here in terms of our new established parameters of rehabilitation versus atonement is that rehabilitation is what she's doing. Atonement is what she's seeking. And what she can't do, the circuit that she can't close, what Aiko is allowed to do, to talk directly to the families and say, please, either forgive me or not, but I need you to know that I was this person at that time when I killed this person.
Yeah.
So, how's she supposed to do that? You can't do that as the Borg. And she's like, well,
7 of 9 assimilated who knows how many thousands of individuals into the collective.
But she didn't do it herself.
Well, at some point, yeah, she says that she did it.
But the Borg...
Well, yeah, I mean, she was programmed to do so.
But if the Borg is the Borg plural, not the Borg one.
Sure. But she knows that in her physical body, with her nanotubules, her Borg assimilation tubules, that's the word, that she physically assimilated others. And I would say that her atonement for that partly is, well, look at what she's done with Icheb and those twins who never talked. She has been doing the things to make sure that those people will live productive lives as sort of restitution, recompense for the things that she did to others. She knows she can't undo, but she can give these others a leg up. She can actually work through maybe some of the guilt, the remorse that she definitely does experience now, because she knows that she inflicted this on other people.
So if she's atoning for something, then what she's doing or what she's admitting to in this episode is that she doesn't understand it?
Maybe.
Is this the revelation that she's kind of working through?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, let's move on and let's talk about another topic here, which, oh boy, is front and center to the episode.
I have a few things to say.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
We got the capital punishment episode, and the doctor in 7 of 9, I mentioned it in the last segment, they have this short bit of dialogue where they really cover every angle, almost every angle that you could. And it's just a few minutes of screen time, and it's so efficient. And I love a script that is efficient like this. Mm-hmm. And bear with me, I condensed this just a little bit, but these were the most important lines to me, I felt, out of the scene. The doctor says, no matter how terrible the crimes these men committed, it seems wrong to hand them over to be executed. And 7 says, executing them ensures they'll never pose a threat to anyone again. And the doctor says, so would life sentences. The 7 says confining them for life would require significant resources. The doctor says killing is wrong, no matter who's doing it. Just a handful of lines of dialogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do we hit? We debate human rights versus public safety, and then 7 actually uses cost as a justification, which we'll get into in just a second.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor is advocating for even the possibility of rehabilitation,
right?
And about the morality or lack of morality of killing, even when it is part of the legal structure. And by the way, it was true when this episode was made, and it is still true today, that in most places in the U.S., and I can only speak for the U.S., it costs far more to put someone to death than it does to incarcerate them for life. So we need to take that line of argument directly out of the public debate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's you and I are focusing on the same scene in different times because there is also the scene or a segment of this scene where the doctor says, what about rehabilitation?
Yeah.
Given the chance, some of these men might become productive members of society one day. And then 7 says their victims won't have the same opportunity. And the doctor replies, and that justifies taking their lives, an eye for an eye? It's not justice, it's revenge. So this is something that made me go down a very specific rabbit hole.
I love it when you do that.
This is something that I've seen in other science fiction shows. I'll bring up a reference. I'm sure that some of the audience members will get it. Some of them will be like, Norm, we know how much you love this other show, but please bear with me. So let's take a step back and look at what's being set up here in a historical context from 1755 BC, not BC, but BC, before Christ, to this very same philosophical dilemma that we're discussing in real time, or at least in this episode, in the 24th century. That's about a little over 4,000 years that we're talking about this particular dilemma in ethics. Mm-hmm. When Joleg says to Neelix, when they're playing Kadiskat, Vecto Valik Kavadam, it's ancient Nigerian. It means favor the victims. In this episode, that's what that means. In history, it's actually known as lex talionis. So lex talionis is also known as an eye for an eye. The law of lex talionis, or Hammurabi's code, and I'll expand on that in a second. An eye for an eye is a commandment found in the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verses 23 through 27, expressing the principle of reciprocal justice, measure for measure. The earliest known use of the principle appears in the Code of Hammurabi, which predates the writing of the Hebrew Bible, but not necessarily oral traditions. Lex talionis, or reciprocal justice, bears the same principle that a person who has injured another person is to be penalized to a similar degree by the injured party, much like Joleg's sentence is to be executed when he tells Neelix, after you're convicted, the family of the victim sentences you. So the Code of Hammurabi is the longest, best organized, best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. It's written in Old Babylon, or the Old Babylonian dialect of Akkadian, and it was, exacted by Hammurabi, who was the first, king of the first dynasty of Babylon. Now, this is the reason why I bring up Babylon 5, because in an episode that's very similar to this, the chief of security, Michael Garibaldi, he is literally almost licking his chops when he's listening to somebody being sentenced to death by the legal system. Ambassador Delenn, who is a very staunch, stalwart defender of life and law, she is appalled by his reaction when this prisoner is supposed to be sentenced to death. Garibaldi says to her, "I'm an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of guy." Ambassador Delenn says, "So you support a system that would leave everyone blind and toothless?" Garibaldi says, "Not everyone, just the bad guys." So let's put a pin on, quote unquote, the bad guys, because that's
just the bad guys.
That's the point that I'm going to get to later. But I just wanted to put this into context of how 7 reacts, how the doctor reacts, how we react to, well, if this person did this, then therefore they should be punished by this.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out personally, like, why is that reaction so strong in us? It's because it's been in our cultures for 4,000 years. It's been in writing, it's been in song, it's been in entertainment, it's been every single way that humanity has been able to tell that particular ethical story. Can somebody be forgiven for crimes against humanity? The ethical quandary of, well, why don't people just forgive Hitler?
Yeah.
Right? Aren't those crimes also, in the same way that 7, committed crimes against hundreds of thousands of people that she's never met or never knew? Yeah. So that's just, again, it's not an issue of right or wrong. It's an issue of why do we react this way? And
I think the reaction is very understandable. We all have a heightened sense of our own morality. We all have this heightened sense of, well, if somebody does something to me, then I should be able to make sure that there is justice served that satisfies me. on my terms. And quite frankly, this is why, look, for all the imperfections that the U.S. justice system has, and there are imperfections in other developed modern justice systems, part of the thing that keeps them going is that you take away this idea that the individual is the one who gets to exact justice, aka sometimes confused with revenge, on the offending party. You know, by putting this up to a jury of peers, by putting this up to a judge, somebody who, in the best sense, would be impartial. Again, doesn't always play out that way, not always perfect, but I would argue that that is a better system than allowing individuals who are aggrieved to then take out whatever they feel like. Maybe it is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I think that is how you swiftly descend into chaos.
Well, there's a really interesting line. I don't think either of us brought this up in our observations, but there is a line where Tom was saying, like, hey, look, I was in prison, they were trying to rehabilitate me. And I think it was Neelix said, like, yeah, but you weren't facing the death penalty, right? There's no death penalty in the Federation. So here's the other thing. If they wanted to rehabilitate these prisoners and they wanted to put them in a position where they could better service society, then why does the doctor or Zimmerman have to reprogram 675 holograms to do manual labor?
Right.
I mean, is that an argument out there? It's like, okay, I get that he's there. I get that Tom did something bad and he should atone for it. But right now he's hanging out with 3 squares a day, probably really good TV, cot in a bed.
Right.
But he betrayed his oath. So Eddington, gets chased by Cisco and his people who are doing what they believe is right, gets bombed from orbit, but Tom gets to hang out in, a Starfleet cushy prison, while holograms are like cleaning out plasma ducts. I mean, come on. We got to find some kind of consistency here.
Yeah, agreed. All right. I got to bring up a couple other topics here real quick. One, I don't think this one is even up for debate, but I just love how on the nose this is. That, all right, Joleg says to Neelix, it's common knowledge that all Benkarans are criminals. And this show does not tiptoe at all around the racism inherent in the Nigerian criminal system. Benkarans are 10% of the population, but make up 80% of the prison population. I didn't even bother to look up what current prison statistics are in the U.S. You all can do that on your own, but I think you see where we're headed with this. Also, the fact that the wealthy can pay for their own reduced sentences, and stereotypes here clearly justify disproportionate punishment. Again, we are throwing out the subtlety with the metaphor here. But I love it when the show, I mean, broadly, Star Trek in general, they're making this very direct commentary about bias policing, incarceration rates, this inequity. And then the question to us as the audience in the 20th or early 21st century where we are, do we get it yet? When a system is designed to see a specific group of people as inherently criminal, then every interaction with that group becomes the opportunity to reinforce the bias. Stated another way, to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And people wonder why we have this never-ending cycle of crime and punishment the way that we do, because we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Our hosts are men of deep convictions, none of them currently pending. Let's hear them pass judgment on this episode.
All right, we made it through, another heavy, complicated episode. I'm impressed at how Voyager has been playing around with our emotions here. Every now and then you just get kind of a light, like, oh, why did we do that? Why do we have to spend time over there? Oh, no, because now we're going to drop something heavy on you.
And consistently, like in the last few weeks.
So here we are at the midway point of the final season of Voyager with Repentance, an episode with a lot to digest. And Norman, I'll kick it over to you first to tell us if the episode holds up, and then we'll get into the myriad of morals, meanings, messages here.
So I'd like to start off with a quote from Mark Twain, who said, "Find a job you enjoy doing, and you will never have to work a day in your life." This is the kind of episode for Mission Log I love getting into with you, John. This is what we do, right? It's
awesome.
It's a privilege to have been chosen to co-host with this, because it's this kind of episode that really challenges what we do, who we are, and what we believe Star Trek still says to a modern audience. And I think that's fantastic. You know, it's something that I love doing now for, the Roddenberry Podcast Network and for Roddenberry Entertainment. It's not a question of if this episode holds up. It's when this episode holds up, because it's probably, or it was just as important in 2001, January 31st, 2001. And it is probably just as important, if not more important, today. Right now in 2025. I know that the world was different in 2001 because this is still January. We're still 8 months away from 9/11, right? But I do believe that when a story is told the right way, for the right reason, with the right meaning and the right talent, it transcends time. The interesting thing is, it's really interesting how we get to this now between you and I. And I think it's almost kind of serendipitous in a way, because I've always wanted to kind of like talk about these bigger meaning type episodes in real time and how it applies today, just like Star Trek did in 1966 as it applied to yesterday. So does it hold up? Yeah, in every possible way, right? In every possible way. I want to reference this scene when Neelix feeds the prisoners the second time. So he goes to Joleg. Joleg says, "It's common knowledge that all Benkarans are criminals. So when I was found in the vicinity of a murder, I was immediately arrested." Neelix says, "Are you saying you didn't do it?" Joleg says, "I told you, I'm Benkaran. What I say doesn't matter." So now let's take this scene and substitute Benkarans for Latinos, African Americans, Indians, Asians, or any brown or black people, and ask yourself, does this episode hold up? Because in 2025, if you're not paying attention to the news, then I suggest reading any credible news agency and see what is happening in the world today, right? And then go back to that scene and then substitute Benkarans for other races that I just talked about, and ask yourself in your deepest moral center what the Doctor is asking of Seven. Do you have it within yourself to be judge, jury, and executioner when you yourself could be on the other side of judgment? Because that's what we're talking about here. That's what the episode is so good and so powerful, and probably almost even overloaded like the way Lineage was. It's in terms of the depth of the conversation, that you and I have, again, just scratched the surface on, but it's a surface that needs to be readdressed in real time right now. And more people need to scratch that surface and start paying attention, right?
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
I'm not exonerating Aiko or Joleg for what they did. What I'm saying is that people that are in the wrong place at the wrong time doesn't mean they're criminals.
Yeah.
They're just there. Right?
Yeah. And the punishment that those criminals get is very often skewed based on other factors that have to do with wealth or race or other societal issues that are grossly unequal to others of means who get to slip by somehow. We see it all the time. Look, does the episode hold up? Yes. I didn't even write anything for that because yes, it holds up. But I want to point out something that I brought up earlier. Guest stars are great, but this does something I think better than a lot of other Voyager episodes do, which is the most compelling part of this story is this interesting arc that Aiko has, this debate about capital punishment, this debate about criminal justice and, reform and, well, repentance. But we circle back around at the end and reinforce to the audience how this actually impacts one of our central characters. And that's the balancing act with a show like this, is how do we bring in strong talent? How do we tell a compelling story? How do we make it relevant? But then if we have to say goodbye to those people at the end of the episode, how do we make sure that there's an impact on our core characters who are going to see week after week after week? And they did that beautifully here. Like I said before, it's not a 7 of 9 episode, but we let the resonance of this sit with 7 of 9 well after our guests are gone. So I think it is a real testament to how this story is crafted to fit in so much, to make something so relevant, and then put the emotional button on the end and let us appreciate that, how that affects a character that we've gotten to know much better. I can't separate whether this episode holds up or not from the message, the world-meaning messages. So I'll just go right into it. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say on that as well. But to me, tied to whether this episode holds up or not, I think this is another one of those examples of Star Trek doing what it does best. It just reaches right through the TV screen to engage us, the audience, in a direct and urgent conversation about an important social issue. And this time it's crime, punishment, and the death penalty specifically. So the episode is taking a very clear stance that the death penalty is not just ineffective, it is barbaric. And we, of course, when I say we, we're talking about the crew. We're talking about Starfleet. We're talking about the Federation. We're talking about our ideal selves. We side with those enlightened members of Voyager's crew who uphold the Starfleet principle that justice should aim higher than simple retribution. Okay? But here's what I love. The episode doesn't stop there because there's so many other points to ponder. It challenged us to examine the deeper systemic failures that perpetuate suffering. How often do we assume that some people are criminal by nature, that they're unworthy of compassion or rehabilitation? And how often does society create those outcomes by withholding support and empathy and other alternatives? Oh, wait, there's more. It also highlights a very familiar injustice that very often people with means and privilege can negotiate their way to lighter sentencing, and others face the full weight of a biased system. And again, those parallels to our modern day world, they are unmissable. They are definitely intentional. And then I touched on this a moment in the last segment, if it made it into the edit, but if not, I'll reiterate it here. Can we think of evil not as some outside force, but as a result of biology and experience, a combination of nature and nurture? Because if we accept that, then we have to accept that any one of us could be a few steps or maybe just a few neurons away from the same actions. And please, let me be very clear here. That does not absolve anyone of accountability, but it should radically reshape how we approach justice and punishment and redemption. Remember, Aiko says, if my death helps you find peace, then I can accept it. But do we really sleep better at night because someone else who harmed us is dead? Revenge is not justice, and it never has been. So the harder question for us, can we accept the repentance? Are we willing to recognize when someone has genuinely changed? It won't always work, but I would advocate that it is always worth trying.
I have another quote for you, John.
I love it when we get quotes dropped into our show.
This is actually attributed to Fyodor Dostoevsky, his House of the Dead, written in 1862. The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. So I know that there is an obvious redemption arc with Aiko and Seven. And I could have gone down that road, for my moral meaning or message, because it was fantastic, as you have described. But maybe that was the message in 2001, and rightfully so. A great moral message or meaning to find. But I think that there's a more important message I see in this episode in 2025. And we've said this before, it's not just about the "you see Timmy" moment. Some Star Trek episodes are, and some are just overwhelming, because that's, I think, what they're intended to be, to make us think, to challenge, our conceptions or misconceptions of how things are in the moment. So when we watch this in 2025 with real marginalized people, in the world, I want to go all the way back to a discussion point that we talked about. Let's go back to Michael Garibaldi saying, not everyone, just the bad guys when it comes to justice and punishment. So if law enforcement decides based on their set of laws who is considered, quote unquote, the bad guys, then by that logic, ICE, the federal arm of law enforcement, funded by the government, the U.S. government, and supervised by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, who are sworn to protect the United States and its citizens from, quote unquote, those who categorize as the bad guys. So by this algebra, for those of us, the United States law-abiding citizens, we all agree with this math, right? That is a rhetorical question. Of course we don't agree with that math. I mean, a majority of us don't. Some do. But that's not the case. As a society, we have been raised or programmed, take your pick. This is the reason why I brought up Lex Talionis and Hammurabi's Code, a 4,000-year-old debate about ethics and justice earlier on. We accept that the good guys wear white, the bad guys wear black. But today, those who are committing atrocities in the name of the good guys actually wear black and are masked, all in the name of dispensing justice. Again, that isn't all completely true, but a lot of it is. So what happens when we can no longer either trust those who enforce the law, those who rewrite the law, or those who manipulate the law, based on their agendas and their objectives? So again, we could spend a year on this, but we don't have a year. So it boils down to two questions. One, ask ourselves as a Star Trek fan, do we actually believe that this feature is going to exist? And two, as human beings in the real world, do we actually believe that we can achieve this based on the current situation in which we live? Because we all want, we as Star Trek fans who believe in Gene Roddenberry's vision want that future. So all I can really leave behind in my final thoughts is this quote from Justice in season 1 of The Next Generation. When making his final plea to commute Wesley's death sentence, Picard says, "I don't know how to communicate this, or even if it is possible, but the question of justice has concerned me greatly of late. And I say to any creature who may be listening, there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute. Even life itself is an exercise in exceptions." And because we are living in times of deeply troubling religious polarization, I believe this still applies as a tenet of offering forgiveness and understanding from the King James Bible. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." The Gospel according to John, chapter 8, verse 7, in case anyone forgot.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Prophecy.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11. Online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, and Paul Shadwell. If you ever shot a man in the Delta Quadrant, just to watch him die, when you hear that warp core blowing, just hang your head and cry. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.